Okay, so the chapter we waited for is finally here. Not 1164, but chapter 1163. Now, at the time of making this video, I'm using the fan translation, so a few things might be slightly off. And the truth is, I took so long to make this, but I feel the latest chapter has added to what I can confirm. And it's the truth. What we all speculated has been confirmed, and honestly, the end of this chapter, it's tragic. We see Roger telling Rocks to wait, and this is a Domio reverses scenario. 1164 has confirmed it. The Rocks he's speaking to is not the original Zebek. As we know, Imu definitely Domio reversed this man into attempting to kill his own family. Now, I know it's a bit weird to talk about the end of the chapter before we even cover the beginning. But that's exactly the approach Oda takes in this flashback. Going back to go forward. Because this entire side quest of a mini arc is a memory from Loki. How he knew such intimate details of this event that the rest of the world, mind you, did not know is anyone's guess. Maybe his father told him, or a survivor of the incident spoke of it in a bar. At the start, we're presented with an amazing dialogue, and while I'm relying on fan translations, it's very fascinating. There's a particularly interesting exchange between Rocks Zebek and Imu, or Mu as it refers to itself. And frankly, for most of the conversation, it's kind of funny. Presenting Imu in a surprisingly lowly, almost pathetic way. Think of Zetsu or Father from Fullmetal Alchemist. I mean, there's something off. Something unsettling, but also oddly humorous. Now, in this translation, Rocks uses the word rat to describe Imu's followers. He shouts, "Hey, king of rats over there." And, I'm thinking, like, rats? I mean, that wasn't necessary. But it's also a pretty apt description, He's essentially calling Imu a traitor, a snitch, a king of false rulers, and listen, these guys are worse than rats. Honestly, calling them rodents is an insult to the species itself. But it's Imu's response that really piques my interest. To think it was you, Davy Jones. There it is again. Davy Jones. And I know not every chapter drops a revelation that directly confirms the theory. But at this point, it's hard to see this as coincidence. Because for decades, figures of the past have confused present-day characters with people from 800 years ago. Luffy has been mistaken for Joy Boy by Emeth and Zunesha. So there's precedent. What we know for sure, someone did work with Imu to bring down the ancient kingdom, but it wasn't Joy Boy. The next line clarifies this. I think you got the wrong person there. I never even met that fella. However, a promise ought to be kept. Won't you agree? Now, everything here is subtle, layered, and open to interpretation. Not gospel, but part of the fun. And yes, I know speculating like this gives One Piece fans a bad rep, but Oda keeps giving us material worth dissecting. Okay, now in previous videos, I've argued why Davy Jones and Joy Boy are different people, and honestly, the evidence in this chapter only reinforces that. As in 1164, Zebek asks Imu who they fear more, Joy Boy or Davy Jones. And of course, I'll present a list I made before 1164 dropped. It consists of the many reasons why it was logically impossible for them to be the same person. Mainly because I worked hard on that. Now, here's where things get interesting. Teach and Luffy share more similarities than we might feel comfortable admitting. One key similarity lies in how they select their crews. Each picks individuals who are in no way shaped by a single vision. In Alabasta, Vivi questions this, and Zoro gives his famous response. The same principle applies to Teach. His crew members don't share a unified dream either. Take Sanji and Zoro, for instance, two very different personalities, constantly at odds. Teach's crew mirrors this dynamic, but with one critical difference: what ultimately decides if someone joins. For Luffy, it's the dream, the vision of the future for that specific individual, which ultimately serves the crew. As Zoro put it, each crewmate doing their own thing that eventually benefits the crew. And who can forget that moment they all stated their dreams before venturing into the Grand Line? For Teach, despite his rumblings about destiny or vision, it's power that determines whether or not you join him. And that's where the clear juxtaposition exists. Luffy's will carries the incarnate will of Roger and Joy Boy, recognized even by figures like Emmett and Zunesha. Teach, on the other hand, carries the will of Zebek and, I speculate, Davy Jones. And here's the thing. I think most of us have forgotten the real reason why Zunesha called Luffy Joy Boy after Luffy's Devil Fruit awakened. Those drums, the sound reverberating through the island, they were the sound of liberation. And in the most obvious sense, that confirmed it. Joy Boy was the Nika of his time. He had the fruit before him, because before it awakened, Zunesha didn't call Luffy by that name. The moment Luffy's power manifested, the recognition came. The drums, the liberation, the acknowledgement. And to create even more distinction, Imu uttered the name Joy Boy after the wave of stored haki Emmett released. Now, think about it, right? If Joy Boy and Davy Jones were the same person, why would Imu call him different names on separate occasions after sensing his presence? It really just doesn't make any sense. Sure, we could argue that characters are addressed differently depending on who is speaking. But consider this. Luffy is called Luffy by his crew. Those who know the legend call him Straw Hat. To apply the same logic to Joy Boy, why in that critical moment would Imu call the name Joy Boy and then switch to Davy Jones when facing Zebek, if they were truly the same person? Because Imu sensed the presence of that man in that moment. And really, at the end of the day, the deciding factor here is the fruit, the Nika fruit. Everything points to the fact that Davy Jones did not possess the Nika fruit, because everyone who witnesses Luffy's Gear 5 form and knows of Joy Boy refers to him in that context. I think a bigger question is, where is the D in Joy Boy's name? So Zunesha recognized it. Emmett mistook Luffy for Joy Boy after seeing that form. So remember, Zoan fruits have a will of their own. They choose their wielder as much as the wielder chooses them. So Zebek certainly didn't possess that fruit. But what he might have been trying to do was unify the Davy clan, to restore the line that led down Joy Boy. Now, whatever he was seeking on Elbaf, he was convinced that it was connected to Nika. But seeing as how Blackbeard didn't even know of that fruit proves just how far from his father's plans he was. And someone else put him up to this. And honestly, it would be really amazing if at the end of it all we get to see this person. Now, Teach never pursued it, and he never mentioned Joy Boy either, or Nika. His ambition seems tied to Davy Jones, and something his father missed and did not know. And yes, when Imu calls the big Davy Jones, it's in reference to a person they betrayed, not Joy Boy. That betrayal was different. It's not about failing a dream, it's about breaking a promise. Now, Davy Jones helped Imu. Imu didn't keep their promise, and in One Piece, promises hold extraordinary weight. We see this echoed everywhere. Emmett, Zunesha, Luffy, even Joy Boy himself and his promise to Fishman Island. Now, promises shape destinies, they alter history, and define legacies. So someone was betrayed, but it wasn't Joy Boy who betrayed his friends. It was Davy Jones and Joy Boy betrayed by Imu. And that brings me back to my original point about how Luffy and Teach select their crews. Now, the way they gather their people, the way they inspire loyalty despite differences, it's a direct reflection of Joy Boy's betrayal. It explains why Oda chose to show Rock's downfall alongside those he considered his crewmates, and why this ties so deeply into the origin of Davy back fights. And of course, the real reason this form of recruiting fails. Look at how easily the Rock's pirates fail. And you can't tell me Aokiji won't betray Teach, and I'm certain Shiryu will attempt to stab him in the back. It's to my understanding that this right here is the entire reason Oda is showing us the parallel between Teach and Zebek's crews. Because the long-standing theory that Imu was once part of Joy Boy's crew might have just been confirmed by this very incident. And now for the first time we can actually see how they managed to do what they did. How the betrayal, the fall, and the rewriting of the world began. Alright, so it's story time. And don't worry, I'll keep it short. Now, I've always believed that the D was separated into two factions, and that one group betrayed the other. But the part that never quite fit, the piece that never clicked into place, was Emu. What role did they play? How could one being sit above gods and kings yet remain invisible in the pages of history? Because, as we've seen, Emu was nowhere near the strength that Joy Boy and Davy Jones were. Those guys were in a league of their own. So it all makes sense when you place them by the king's side. That king was Davy Jones, a pirate and the ruler of the ancient kingdom. But here's the thing, Emu wasn't always a member of Davy Jones' crew. Before that, I'm guessing they sailed under Joy Boy, and during those voyages they saw everything the world had to offer, from Long Ring Longland to Alabasta, Wano, Skypiea, Water 7, I mean every island that would one day become part of the legend we know today. During those journeys, Joy Boy's mission was clear, to be the freest man in the world and help those he deemed friends through promises. Because you have to remember, this era was known for having the largest incidents of oppression. Promises of peace, of equality, of freedom, he made them all. He didn't seek conquest, he sought connection. Think of how Luffy has left a trail of his own promises from Laboon to Wano, Fishman Island, and even Dressrosa. But this was during a time when the 12 kingdoms had already banded together to fight against the ancient kingdom, which under Davy Jones had descended into chaos. Because if the people of the D and the ancient kingdom were these pioneers of peace, then, well, it wouldn't make sense that this is the era that had the most slavery and the most oppression, unless you're telling me the 12 kingdoms were part of this problem. In which case, it seems like both the ancient kingdom and the 12 kingdoms were part of the problem. Now, as Oda himself described, Davy Jones was a pirate who loved treasure. And really, what greater treasure could a man like that seek than the world itself? So, the Harley text, or the Harley record, depending on translation, confirms that Joy Boy did not actively partake in that war, but he spread the embers. In some translation, it says, the sun aggravated the spread of the fires of war. So instead, his actions disrupted both the ancient kingdom and the 12 nations. He stood in the middle, not choosing sides, but protecting the dream, much like Luffy. That's when Emu, ever the covetous opportunist, saw their chance. As Robin once warned Luffy about being so trusting, something tells me Joy Boy found out the hard way. Now, they had influence over Joy Boy, perhaps as an advisor or a confidant, and they convinced him to accept a Davy back fight challenge from Davy Jones himself, who after seeing the unification of the 12 kingdoms knew they were a threat to be taken seriously. He needed the power Joy Boy had, which is the Nika fruit. After all, that fruit has the power to raise morals, to encourage rebellion. But Joy Boy had denied him on all occasions, so he did something that he knew would work with a man like Joy Boy. A game. A series of ridiculous events to win him and his crew over. This was the start of the Davy back fights. Thinking back to the Foxy Pirates, that entire arc, though it was filler, actually represents Luffy in his purest form. A ridiculous and clownish character, but all at the same time a hopeful one. So there has to be something at least taken from that entire thing. And I know, canon events and filler events are completely separated, but I'd like to think that there was a bit of, truth to what Oda showed us, what the studio showed us. But that was the beginning of the end for the D. The ritual was carried out, and Joy Boy lost nearly all of his crewmates in the process, with a little bit of cheating help from Emu, of course. Now, Zunisha and Emmett, or Emeth, I know I've been saying Emmett and mixing it up with Emeth, but it's Emeth. They were among the crew members lost in that chaos. And once the dust settled, Emu defected. Or they were won over, that being their plan. They joined Davy Jones' faction and began a new plan. They promised Davy Jones the entire world if he helped them destroy Joy Boy once and for all. Because even after everything, Joy Boy refused to join Davy Jones, and instead, as a final goodbye to Emmet, Joy Boy stored his haki in him, and the king was convinced and immediately moved to ambush Joy Boy. But there were those who knew. Zunisha and Emmet were aware, but being now part of Davy Jones' crew, they probably couldn't do anything. Zunisha attempted to warn Joy Boy, and Imu took this as a betrayal to them. And at some point, Nefertari D. Lily began to suspect Imu's deception. On the day Joy Boy fell, Imu betrayed Davy Jones, seizing the most powerful weapon of the era and turning the tide of the battle in favor of the 12 nations, whom Imu had secretly allied with, promising the world. In his final moments, Davy Jones cursed the sea itself, damning all who would seek to claim the power of his people, the Devil Fruits. Because when you think about it, this would explain why Blackbeard has this type of, entitlement towards Devil Fruits. Because he is the one who's left to inherit them. Like in a symbolic way, but also physically. His body can withstand that pressure from wielding two Devil Fruits because he comes from a line of the original king. The original king who probably even goes back all the way to the first age. Because I believe that his ancestor Davy Jones was the true king of that era. And with Joy Boy and Davy Jones gone, Imu was free. Free to rewrite history, free to erase their names, their legacies, and the D itself from existence. Hence Imu's words, Mu is not done forming this world. I'm paraphrasing, of course. But Lily, knowing what Imu had done, had already taken precautions. She created the poneglyphs, scattering the truth across the world in a language that could not be erased. That's why Imu despises her. And rather than kill her, Imu might have possessed her. And this might have been through the immortal surgery. It's possible Lily was the user of that fruit. Of course, don't take this part seriously because no evidence exists to actually validate this claim. But yes, when that silhouette is finally revealed, it won't be some unknown entity. It will be Lily herself, the queen who defied gods and kings. But that brings up another question. How did Toki survive? Because we know she's from that era. Well, it makes perfect sense actually. Toki was a member of Joy Boy's crew, and I believe somehow Joy Boy's future sight allowed him to see his own return, the reawakening of his will through the Nika fruit. Because I'm convinced Joy Boy's future sight extended further than anyone else's ever has. He didn't just see moments, he saw eras. And Toki, she took on the role of a prophet. Just like John the Baptist, she was sent to prepare the way, to make sure that when the next sun god appeared, the world would be ready to hear the drums again. So many parallels exist. Every time we read the poneglyphs and what they convey, it's impossible not to feel this ear sense of deja vu. Like we've seen it before. At least for me anyways. And look no further than that one moment before the time skip. The moment when Luffy conveyed a secret encoded message to his crew. A message that only they could understand. He didn't need to say anything. Just a few symbols, and yet the entire crew understood perfectly. That moment right there, it mirrors Joy Boy's poneglyphs. A message carved into stone, not for the world, but for his own people. For those who would one day inherit his will. The poneglyphs weren't just history. They were letters to a crew separated by time. Just like Luffy's 3D2Y message was a letter to his family separated by fate. A promise, a reminder, a vow to get stronger for what's to come. And when you think about it that way, you start to realize how poetic Oda's storytelling really is. This man has been cooking since day one. Every arc, every symbol, every emotional beat, all of it has been echoing the same melody across centuries of ink and imagination. And something tells me we definitely have seen Davy Jones' grave. Remember that gigantic straw hat? Yeah, but that's a video for another day.